Hey there, this is Math 7, Unit 4, Lesson 10, talking today about tax and tip. Alright, so we're learning today about sales tax and tips, and we began off with a little picture here of someone who goes to the store, it looks like, and they buy themselves a pair of sunglasses, which has a price of $10. But of course, when it's scanned on the machine and registered, the total price ends up being $10.45. So something is definitely happening from the time I pick out that sunglass pair there and go to pay for it. I'm being charged an extra 45 cents. So this became a question of what do you notice, what do you wonder? And of course I mentioned already, what I noticed right away was that additional increase of 45 cents. And so if you've done some shopping, what could that be? Well, we'd probably go with, it's probably called a sales tax. And maybe you've had that experience where you've gone to the store with $1 and bought that candy for 99 cents and went, oops, it costs more. So anyways, have a little conversation there in class, hopefully you did today, about how sales tax works. It tends to increase the overall cost, and it's an amount added to what the price is going to be. And that's what's happening with a tax. The same is true for a tip. The difference is that a tax is given to you by whatever city or county you live in, and a tip, you can decide how much of a tip you want to give somebody. It's also an increase to the total price, but you can decide the value for that or what percent that might be. This percentage is set by somebody else, and you just get to pay it. Lucky you. All right, let's look at activity number 2. Activity 2 is called shopping in 2 different cities. It says different cities have different sales tax rates. Here are the sales tax charges on the same 2 items in 2 different cities. Complete the tables. All right, so let's take a look at what we have for city 1. They give you, first of all, in this column, or this row, that you buy paper towels for $8, and it has sales tax of 0.48 or 48 cents is what the sales tax is going to be. And so the total cost becomes $8.48. In essence, what we're looking at here is we take our original price, dollars, and we add the sales tax to that in order to come up with a total cost of $8.48. Okay, that's my total cost right there. If I was to think back to what we did before with working on finding a constant proportionality, I could consider this to be my x and this to be my y. And if I use x and y, I can find out what am I multiplying 8 by, in order to get 0.48 or 48 cents. Okay? So, in this case here, what I might see is I say, well, let's do our y over our x value. And our y was given was 0.48, and our x that was given was simply 8. Well, 0.48 divided by 8 is going to be equal to 0.06. Okay, and you could look at that with a calculator if you chose to, right? I could just do 0.48 divided by 8, and I get my 0.06. Or you could have done it with long division, that works too. But what we're saying here is that my k value, my constant of proportionality, is going to be 0.06. That 0.06 represents our tax rate. Okay, this is our tax rate. That's how much I'm going to be paying in taxes for every $1. So if I go over here to the 1 amount here, I know that I'm multiplying by the k values. I'm multiplying by 0.06. Well, 1 times 0.06 is going to just be 0.06. And that becomes my k value right there. For my total cost, I would add it together. 1 plus 6 cents, that 1.06. And we can see if this holds true there. What if I took the 25 and I multiply by 0.06? Well, I end up with 1.5, which is my tax amount, $1.50. So my total cost will be the price plus the sales tax, which will be $26.50. So what's happened here is we figured out what our sales tax is going to be. I could do the same for $12. I can multiply that by our k value, our tax rate, which is 0.06. And when I multiply that, 12 times 0.06 is 0.72. So I'm going to add an additional 72 cents to my $12 price. So I end up with a total cost of $12.72. In terms of just being an x value, whatever my price is x, and I'm going to be having a sales tax of 0.06. And so my cost is going to be, well, here's where it's interesting, and here's where we're going to make a little jump here. Ready? My cost, my total cost. My total cost is going to be, think back to our last lesson, right? My total cost is going to be 1 times my price plus 0.06 times the price, right? Because I'm doing the whole cost of whatever item it is, and then I'm adding 0.06 of, or 6% of the cost to that. So I'm actually going to combine the 1 and the 0.06 to say that my total cost is going to be the whole and the additional 6% times x. And this is the key thing from this lesson here that we want to take away, is that the total cost becomes the combination of the original and our increase. In this case here, our tax. Our tax rate was 0.06 as a k value. As a percentage, if we move this over, this indicates a 6% tax rate in city number 1. Okay, so 1.06. So where does that 1 come from again? The 1 comes from the whole of the initial price, and then we're adding the sales tax to that right there. Let's take a look at city number 2. Let's see if we can do something similar with that one. When I look at city number 2, I have again my x and my y, and I can find a k value by doing 0.64. This one here, my y, divided by my x value. And that's going to equal 0.08, which as a tax rate, moving over two decimal spots, is an 8% tax rate. Okay, so we know in city 2 there's a higher tax rate. So because it's 8%, I can expect everything to increase from what I had up here. And sure enough, when we look at just paper towels, we went up 48 cents when I bought an $8 worth of paper towels. But when I go to city 2, I'm paying 64 cents. So there's an increase. And that's that difference between 6% and 8%. When I look at this one here, right, again, my total cost is going to be my 25 plus my 2. 25 plus 2 is going to be $27. So for this one here, I have the whole, the original, plus the 0.08 of something, and that's like my 1x plus 0.08x becomes my total, which is 1.08x. Right? So what am I saying with that? Well, what we're saying is that my k value is 0.08. And so if I find 1 times 0.08, my sales tax is is 8 cents there. And now when I combine the whole plus the tax, I have 1.08 like that. So thinking about the x value real quick, this becomes 1 times x plus my sales tax rate, 8% of x, will equal my total cost, which will be 1.08 times x, right? So we're combining the 1 and the 0.08 to come up with our total cost. Okay, so this number right here will be 0.08. This will be 1.08x. Over here, we can multiply by the k value. 12 times 0.08 gives me 96 cents, which means the total will be $12.96. All right, so the key takeaway from this is to recognize that what I'm doing here with the tax is I'm adding the tax to the original price in order to get the total. All right, and so if I wanted to shortcut that up a little bit, I can multiply any cost by 1 point the tax rate. And that 1 represents the original cost there, the whole amount that you're working with at the start of the problem. Okay, so activity number 3 today was shopping in a third city. The third city is interesting in terms of what happens here, because it asks what is the tax rate in this city. If I was to do the same, kind of go through the same process here with this one, and this is an activity that you may or may not have done, okay, in class today. All right, so it's a little bit, maybe a little deeper to think about what's happening here. This one here, what happens is if I do 0.58 and I divide that by 8, I end up with 0.0725. Okay, now that's my rate there. if that was my K value and I plug that into this one right here, well, what is 25 times 0.0725? Well, it ends up being $1.81.2. So I have a difference there. When I multiply that out, I end up with $1.81, not $1.83. There's a difference. So this tax rate doesn't quite seem to be 0.0725, so something is going a little off here. Well, let's see what happens if I do $1.83 divided by 25. So 1.83 divided by 25. When I do that, I end up with 0.0732. So what are you noticing? Do you see how these amounts are close, but not quite the same, are they? Right? So, for example, this guy here is 0.07. We can agree that the 0.07 part does seem to match, right? But here I'm 0.772, here I'm 7.3. So what's it gonna be, right? If I wanted to go out one more decimal spot, let's say I wanted to go there, and decided I'm gonna round from this point here because I wanna get out 3 spaces, what could I round that to? If I want to round to the, not the 10th, the 100th, but I rounded the thousandths place, the nearest thousandths, this would round up because of being the 5, and that could become 0.073 by rounding up. This one, if I'm rounding to the nearest thousandths, with it being a 2, I would round down to 0.073, something like that, right? So that's with some rounding going on. Well, what's happening here? Well, here I have 0.07 divided by 1. Oh my goodness, well 0.07 divided by 1 is going to simply be 0.07. So there's nothing left there. We just chopped off everything after the 7. So something's a little off there. So I have what looks like to be 3 different tax rates almost going on with this problem. Okay? So what's happening in this situation is an issue that we would refer to just as a rounding issue. Okay? When you're dealing with tax rates, you end up with amounts that seem to go on and on and on forever as you do the division. And so what happens with a calculator or a cash register is they're going to have to make a rounding decision for whether you round that amount kind of up or down, whatever it's going to be. For the most part, what I've learned when it comes to taxes is most of the time they're rounding up. They'd like to take a little bit more if possible. So just something you figure out as you get a little older. So anyways, in this case here, we could probably say safely, might be a safe bet, that the tax rate is probably somewhere about 0.073 is what's happening, pretty generally speaking, okay? This one's a little different, but that's okay. So if I wanted to figure this one out, maybe I multiply it by 0.073, and if I did that, 12 times 0.073, I would get 0.876. Now 0.876, I can't have 0.876 as an amount, so I'm going to have to round that 7/6 up to 8. So I'm going to put 88 cents for the $12 one. Okay, so just an idea on what you can look at there. Okay, for the sales tax on laundry soap, Kieran says it should be about 84 cents. Lynn says it should be 87 cents. Do you agree with either of them? Well, what we looked at just here a second ago, sorry I got ahead of myself, is that when I multiply 12 by 0.073 and I do the math on that one, like I said, we end up with 0.876, right? And so if I'm going to round this number up, it's going to be more like 0.88 cents. So realistically, I'm not going to agree with Kieran because that's not enough. That's too little. And this one also is a little less too. They just chop that amount off. And I can guarantee if the tax collector is asking for that 6,000th of a cent, they're going to get it and they're going to say round it up. And that's just what you're going to deal with. Okay? So that's how that works there. All right, looking at activity number 4, dining at a restaurant. It says Jada has a meal in a restaurant. She adds up the prices listed on the menu, which is on the next page, for everything they ordered and gets a subtotal of $42. Now, if you're not sure what a subtotal is, that means it's going to be your bill, but to that, you're going to have to add an amount of tax to that. You might also add a tip to that, but before you get to the tip, maybe we can stop there. We won't go there quite yet, but you're going to at least add a tax to that bill and that's going to become your total. Okay, this is a subtotal, which is meaning it comes before the actual total. This is your real final amount you're going to pay. A subtotal means like before taxes, before tips, before the extra stuff is added to your bill. So in this restaurant, the subtotal was $42. All right, which we can see listed right here. Subtotal, $42. When the check comes, it says they also need to pay $3.99 in sales tax. We circle that amount there, $3.99 in sales tax. We know that a tax is going to be an increase, right? So what percentage of the subtotal is the sales tax? So the percentage of that. Well, here's what we would do. If I wanted to find out the sales tax, right, I would take my original amount, 42, right? And that's kind of think of it this way, back to our old way of looking at it. It'd be the whole amount times 42 plus a sales tax amount, we don't know what that is, times 42, is going to equal what our tax is going to be. Well, in this case here, I should say that would be the total. So if I want just, let me back up. I'm going kind of ahead of myself here. Let's do it this way. Let's ignore this part for now. Okay. Since I already know the tax amount is $3.99, if I wanted to find the tax amount, that's just this part of the equation. That's going to be the percentage, this tax percent, times 42 will give me just the tax amount. What I was setting up before was actually if I wanted to work from the total amount. So because I had the tax amount given to me, I can just ignore this part for right now. Okay, sorry about that. So now to find out what the tax rate is going to be, we can call that X in this case. I would divide both sides by 42, right? Divide both sides by 42. And 3.99 divided by 42 says that X is equal to 0.095. Now it wants to know this as a percentage. That is not a percentage. So what we want you to do is move this over two places, and the decimal will go there, and I end up with 9.5%. So the tax rate in this location is 9.5%. I'd recommend moving quickly. That's a pretty high tax rate, or eat somewhere different. All right, so that's the tax rate there. After tax, the total is $45.99. That's our total part right there. So what percentage of the subtotal is the cost? What they're asking is what percentage of the subtotal, so $42, what percentage of the subtotal is the total, percentage of the subtotal is the total. So we know we have $40 to start with, right? So in our case here, what we're forgot to explain this to you. Okay, so after the tax, the total is $45.99. Let me back up there. Yeah, so that's our total. We know that's there. That's going to be 100% of the bill plus 9.5% of the bill is going to be my total, right? So altogether, what I'm paying is 109.5%. That's how much my total bill is going to be, is 109.5% of the subtotal, which means that if I took the subtotal, right, $42, and I multiplied by, move this over 2 spaces, 1.095, right? What I should come up with then, and we'll see if I'm working right here this morning, 42 times 1.095 gets me $45.99, which is our actual total. So this amount here, 1.095, represents the 1 times the subtotal plus the tax rate, 0.095, times the subtotal combined together. So we put the 1 and the 0.95, and those line up there, and that X value for us combines together, and that is our subtotal that we're multiplying by. Okay, so let's look at some more. Okay, let's turn the page here and see what we have. It says with the same problem, they actually pay $52.99. Oh, okay. The additional $7 is a tip for the server. What percentage of the subtotal is the tip? Okay, so what percentage of the subtotal? Well, I'm doing $7 out of the subtotal, which is 42. So in terms of what I'm doing, this is my tip out of the subtotal. So if I do 7 divided by 42, I end up with 0.166, and it goes on for a while, okay? And so to make that into percentage, I'll move this over 2 places. I end up with 16.6%. Could I round that? I probably could. All right, if I do the calculator part, I have 7 divided by 42, and it goes on forever. So this one here, I probably, knowing that it goes there forever, I probably could round that and make that 16.7, right? So it depends on, do I round, do I not round? That's a good question, right? It's always a good question, but it gets you pretty close there. Number 2, the tax rate at this restaurant is 9.5%. Man, a lot of pricey places these guys are living. Another person's subtotal is $24.95. How much will their sales tax be? It's just asking for the sales tax, not the total cost. So all I'm asking you to do is do the subtotal times the sales tax. In this case here, because the sales tax is 9.5%, to write that as a decimal, we're going to move it over 1, 2, right? So you end up with times 0.095, and so 24.95 times 0.095 is going to equal $2.37. So my sales tax right here, if I want to write in the column here, would be $2.37. Some other person's sales tax is $1.61. How much was their subtotal? All right, well, let's look at the equation above it, right? We know it's going to have the same tax rate, correct? So we know if we set up the equation, we're going to have the same tax rate. And in this case here, that's the tax amount. We have our tax amount, which is $161. The information we don't know is the subtotal. So that becomes our missing value, our subtotal. So X times this amount gives me my tax. So I need to solve for X. So we'll divide both sides by 0.095, and $1.61 divided by 0.095 for our subtotal, right? Our subtotal is going to equal 16.947. Now, we're not going to leave it like that. We're going to know we're working with money, and money goes out 2 decimals to here. So I need to look at this value and do some rounding. So we're going to go ahead and round that up to make it $16.95 would have been the subtotal there. So that's what we're going to do for that one. Okay? Are you ready for more? Let's see if we are. Elena's cousin went to a restaurant. The part of the entire cost of the meal that was tax and tip together was 25% of the cost of the food. So tax and tip, right? Tax and tip was 25%. What could the tax rate and tip be? Well, we know if we combine those together, we get 25%. So really, you can decide what you want it to be. As long as it gets 25, it could work. So for example, the tax rate could be 5% and the tip could be 20. And that gets you a combined 25%. No problem. I could say that the tax rate is 8%. All right, and if it's 8% there, then the tip is going to be 25 minus 8, 17%. You can make any combination you like. It just needs to sum up together to be 25, like so. All right, so in summary of today's lesson, we talked a lot about rounding things up, right? So if I look at a problem where I have a tax times an amount and I get 0.8625, I'm going to have to do some rounding there. So in this case here, it's going to round to 86 from 86.25. Sometimes it's rounding down, sometimes it's rounding up. Depends on kind of what you're looking at there. The total cost to the customer is the item price plus the sales tax. So that's how we end up with that percent increase being above 100, right? Because it's the item price, which is 100%, plus the sales tax, which in this case here is 7.5%. So those two things combined make the percent increase be 107.5%. The same is true with a tip. If I have a 15% tip, the total is going to be 115% because of that percentage increase there. Okay, so take a moment to start working on your homework and then press pause and come back and press play when you're ready to check to see how you did. Okay, so here's today's homework. Okay, in a city in Ohio, the sales tax rate is 7.25%. Complete the table to show the sales tax and the total price including tax for each item. All right, so sales tax, that becomes in a sense our rate or our K value there, right? And so we're going to take the 7.25. I can write it like this. I know my decimal started here. Move it over 1 and 2 spots. So add a placeholder 0 there. That becomes my K value. So I'm going to multiply every one of these by 0.0725. Right? And 0.0725 times 0.0725. And that's going to give me my sales tax. So my sales tax in this case here would be 58 cents. 22 times that amount there actually gets you 1.595. But what do you want to do with that? We're going to want to round that up because we don't want to stop here at 9.5. So we're going to round that up to 1.60. This one here, you multiply it out, you end up with 1.05. The price including tax. A couple ways I could do this here, right? I can add these together. I can say that it's 8 plus 0.58, and I can have 8.58. I could also multiply 8 by what amount? Do you recall? If I did, just draw a little box here, if I did 8 times 1.0725, that's my whole and my percentage. If I multiply that together, what I end up with is that same amount. Okay? For our case here, because we did the columns already, all we really need to do is add 22 and $1.60 to make $23.60. For $14.50 and $1.05, that becomes $15.55. So I can just add them together, it's no problem. But part of the lesson is recognizing that if I take my price before tax, this amount, and multiply it by the sales tax with a 1 in front of it to represent the original, I actually can come up with the price including tax there. Let's look at number 2. It says the sales tax rate in New Mexico is 5.125%. Select all the equations that represent the sales tax T you would pay in New Mexico for an item of cost C. Okay, so to find the tax, we're going to multiply C times the tax rate. That's what we're going to do, right? Our cost before tax, like before, times the sales tax rate. So 5.125% can be rewritten, moving the decimal over here, as 0.05125. That's written as a decimal value there. Whatever that decimal is going to be, I would multiply it by C in order to find out my tax rate. So let's take a look at what we have. We have, in this case here, 0.05. Well, this is 5.1. They didn't convert it right, so we would say nope, not going to work. Here we have 0.5. It only went over 1 decimal place, not going to be enough there. And for C, it does go over 2 places, 0.05, that matches, so that's going to be okay. This one, we have C divided by the right amount, but this should be multiplied, right? We're multiplying there, so that's the wrong way. This one here is interesting because it's 5.125, which is what we had, divided by 100. When you divide by 100, what are we doing? We're basically moving the decimal place over 2 spots. It's the same idea. So even though it's not worked out to become that number, this is the same idea. All right, let's look at number 3. Here are the prices of some items and the amount of sales tax charged on each in Nevada. So to look for the sales tax in Nevada, what we're going to take a look at here again is we're going to consider this our X and this our Y, and we're going to find our sales tax by saying that really is our K value, our constant of proportionality. Okay, so in this case here, what we're going to do, we'll do 0.46 divided by 10. Okay, when we do 0.46 divided by 10, what we end up getting is 0.046, because that divided by 10 means move the decimal point over 1. And to turn that into a tax rate, instead of writing 0.46, we're going to move that decimal place over 2 to there, and we end up with 4.6% is our tax rate in Nevada. Okay, so we could look at the other ones just to confirm that, to make sure that that's accurate. So that's what I would do there. So to write an expression for the amount of sales tax charged in dollars on an item that costs C dollars. So what's happening then, and what we do is we take our tax rate and we can write that as a decimal, 0.046, and that will be multiplied by our value of the cost, whatever that's going to be, and that then equals our tax amount, T. Or you could write that down as T equals 0.046 C. So whichever way you want to set that up, that works there. Okay, but that's our idea. Now, your teacher may say that the correct answer is just that, and the reason that would be the correct answer is because it does ask for an expression, right? If it wanted an equation, we would have an equal sign. If it's just an expression, we can leave it like that. And that's the difference sometimes between an expression and an equation. Okay, let's take a look then at finding each amount for the next section. Just with a little math here. So finding each amount, we're going to start here with the first one. We have 3.8%. So to make that into a decimal, we're going to move it over 1, 2. So that becomes 0.038. 0.038 of is times, and 25. And 0.038 times 25 is 0.95. 2%, we'll move it over 1, 2. That becomes 0.002. 0.002 of means multiply of 50. Multiply that out and you get 0.01. And then this one, 180.5%, moving it over 2, we end up with 1.805 times 99, and that becomes 178.695. So just doing some multiplication there, and I use the calculator to get those values there. Okay, on Monday the high was 60 degrees Fahrenheit, awesome. On Tuesday the high was 18% more. How much did the high increase from Monday to Tuesday? So how much did it increase from Monday to Tuesday? Okay, well, we had 60 degrees of what we started with, and we increased by 18%. So we take our degrees, and we're going to multiply that by 18%, which is 0.18, right, moving over 2. So 60 times 0.18 is equal to 10.8. So how much did the high increase? Well, it increased by 10.8 degrees is what it increased by. That's 18% more. It then asks you for the actual temperature on Tuesday. If you wanted to determine the temperature on Tuesday, you would just add that to your original 60, and you would say it's 70.8 degrees. But that's not what they asked you to do. They just wanted to know how much did it increase, 10.8 degrees. And finally, number 6, we're going to complete the table here. It says, explain or show your reasoning. We have a radius, we have circumference. All right, so we know that to find the circumference is equal to 2 times pi times the radius. All right, so in this case here we have a radius of 2.8. So if I did 2 times pi times 2.8, that will give me my circumference. And when I put all of those things in my calculator there, I come up with a value of 17.59 feet. Okay, for the next one, 13 millimeters. We'll do 2 times pi times the radius, and when I do 2 times pi times 13, I come up with 81.68 millimeters. Now to go the other way, in this case here they give us the circumference. That means I'm going to do 2 times pi times r, and we're going to solve for r, we can set this equal to 56.5 and work backwards. So if I divide by 2 and divide by pi, 56.5 divided by 2 pi will leave me with the r. And in that case there, we're going to get something that's about 9. Okay? Looking for whole numbers because again, we're probably just using an approximation for pi, but you end up with something like that. Looking at the next one, see example here. All right, let's take our 75.4 and we're going to say that that's equal to 2 pi r. So we'll divide it by 2 and divide it by pi. So 7.54 divided by 2 on your calculator will get you 37.7. If I divide that by pi, I end up with 12.123028271. But again, we're just using an approximation for pi, so we would say the radius is probably about 12. And we can leave it there. And this is going to still be inches, that's centimeters, and that's all you got. Hope that helps you out with it today. Good luck on tomorrow's lesson.